Well, hello, and welcome to the very final installment in my podcast of the Superman in the Bugout. This is part 3, and it's the 46th Craphound podcast I've done, which is pretty cool, not counting the lectures and stuff, which probably brings it up to 50. I'm Cory Doctorow. The story was originally published on Spec, Canada's national science fiction magazine, which is actually a hell of a magazine. Certainly worth a look, and full of the kind of stuff you're not likely to see unless you subscribe. And it was reprinted in my short story collection, my 2003 short story collection, A Place So Foreign and 8 More, which apparently is still selling because I just got a royalty check, which is pretty cool. 3-year-old short story collections are not exactly white-hot commercial items, so I'm pretty happy about that. Just got back from the Red Hat Summit in Nashville, where I gave a talk. A lot of you came up and said hello to me there. I really appreciate it. That was a really good audience to talk to. I love talking to good geeky audiences. I've got a couple more of those coming up this year. In December, I'm going to go to Usenix LISA, which is the big sysadmins conference in DC, and give a talk there. It's going to be pretty cool, talking to a room full of sysadmins. I think that they might even reprint my short story, When Sysadmins Ruled the Earth, in the program book, which, if you've been listening to this podcast since the start, was either the first or the second thing I podcasted on this little serial here. You can go back and listen to it if you go to craphound.com/podcast. You can page back through the archives. Thought I'd give you a little view into what I'm working on these days. I've got a short story I'm working on, and believe it or not, about an uplifted coral reef called I, Rowboat, and it's not entirely a comedy story, although I thought it would be when I started on it, and that's almost done, probably a day or two away. Not really sure what to do with it when I'm done with it. I guess might send it to Asimov's or the Infinite Matrix, who published my story I, Robot, which is up for the Hugo Award this year. Pretty cool. And I'm working on this novel, this kid's novel, which I mentioned a couple of times, Little Brother, which is the story of a kid who plays alternate reality games and is really into computers, and who lives in San Francisco, and who gets swept up by the Department of Homeland Security after San Francisco is attacked by terrorists. He gets swept up and taken into custody and treated very badly, and vows revenge, and spends the rest of the novel jamming the DHS, going through all the real-world things that the DHS does today that actually fail to achieve security, and doing them. And the book is almost a how-to for explaining what's wrong with DHS security. It's got stuff like how to get metal onto an airplane or defeat a no-fly list, all that stuff that the DHS is doing inadequately today, greatly inconveniencing us without giving us more security. I've been calling it Encyclopedia Brown Meets the Anarchist Cookbook, and I think it's going to be a really good book for helping kids learn how to think well about security, learn how to think well about liberty, learn how to think well about technology, and I'm having a hoot writing it. Next story that's coming down the pike here is Visit the Sins, story of mine that got reprinted in one of the year's bests, and it's a kind of attention deficit disorder allegory, and I'll start that in a day or two. I'm sorry this one took so long to actually dribble out to you guys. I didn't mean to stretch it out so long. Just all that travel keeps disrupting my schedule. Anyway, here's the final part of the Superman in the Bugout. I really hope you enjoy it. Bye.
Hershey. Yes, Mama? She'd caught him on the way home, flying high over the Fleabag motels on the old Highway 2. "It's Friday," she said. Right, Friday. He'd told her he'd come for dinner, and that meant getting there before sunset. "I'll be there," he said. "Oh, it's not important. It's just me. Don't hurry on my account. After all, you'll have thousands of Shabbos dinners with your mother. I'll live forever." "I said I'll be there." "And don't wear that costume," she said. She hated the costume. When the Department of Defense had issued it to him, she'd wanted to know why they were sending her boy into combat wearing red satin panties. "I'll change." "That's a good boy," she said. "I'm making brisket." By the time he touched down on the roof of his building, he knew he'd be late for dinner. He skimmed down the elevator shaft to the 10th floor and ducked out to his apartment, only to find the door padlocked. There was a note from the building super, tacked to the peeling green paint. Among other things, it quoted the codicil from the Tenant Protection Act that allowed the super to padlock the door and forbade Hershey, on penalty of law, from doing anything about it. Hershey's super hearing picked up the sound of a door opening down the hallway, In a blur, he flew up to the ceiling and hovered there, pressing himself flat on the acoustic tile. One of his neighbors, that guy with the bohemian attitude who always seemed to be laughing at poor, nebbishy Hershey Abramowitz, made his way down the hall. He paused directly below Hershey's still hovering form, reading the note on the door while he adjusted the collar of his ski vest. He smirked at the note and got in the elevator. Hershey let himself float to the ground, his cheeks burning. Damn it, he didn't have time for this, not any of it. He considered the padlock for a moment, then snapped the hasp with his thumb and index finger. Moving through the apartment with superhuman speed, he changed into a pair of nice slacks, a cable-knit sweater his mother had given him for his last birthday, a tweedy jacket, and a woolen overcoat. Opening a window, he took flight. "Thomas, I really can't talk right now," he said. His mother was angrily drumming her rings on the table's edge. Abruptly, she grabbed the bowl of cooling soup from his place-setting and carried it into the kitchen. She hadn't done this since he was a kid, but it inspired the same panicky dread in him. If he wasn't going to eat his dinner, she wasn't going to leave it. "Soup, we have to talk about this. I mean, Defense Fest is only a week away. We've got things to do." "Look, about Defense Fest." "Yes?" Thomas had a wary note in his voice. Hershey's mother reappeared with a plate laden with brisket, tzimmus, and kasha. She set it down in front of him. "We'll talk later, okay?" Hershey said. "But what about Defense Fest?" "It's complicated," Hershey began. His mother scooped up the plate of brisket and headed back into the kitchen. She was muttering furiously. "I have to go," he said, and closed his comm. Hershey chased his mother and snatched the plate from her as she held it dramatically over the sink disposal. He held up his comm with the other hand and made a show of powering it down. It's off, Mama. Please, come and eat." "I've been thinking about selling the house," she said, as they tucked into slices of lemon pound cake. Hershey put down his fork. Sell the house? While his father hadn't exactly built the house with his own hands, he had sold his guts out at his discount menswear store to pay for it. His mother had decorated it, but his father's essence still haunted the corners. "Why would you sell the house?" "Oh, it's too big, Hershey. I'm just one old lady, and it's not like there are any grandchildren to come and stay. I could buy a condo in Florida, and there'd be plenty left over for you." "I don't need any money, Mama. I've got my pension." She covered his hands with hers. "Of course you do, Bubby. But fixed incomes are for old men. You're young. You need a nest egg, something to start a family with." Her sharp eyes, sunk into motherly pillows of soft flesh, bored into him. He tried to keep his gaze light and carefree. "You've got money problems," she said at length. Hershey scooped up a forkful of pound cake and shook his head. His mother's powers of perception bordered on clairvoyance, and he didn't trust himself to speak the lie outright. He looked around the dining room, furnished with faux chinoise screens, oriental rugs, angular art glass chandeliers. "Tell Mama," she said. He sighed and finished the cake. "It's the new minister. He won't give me my pension unless I tell him my secret identity." "So?" his mother said. "You're so ashamed of your parents you'd rather starve than tell the world that their big-shot hero is Hershey Abramowitz. I, for one, wouldn't mind. Finally, I could speak up when my girlfriends are going on about their sons, the lawyers." "Mom," he said, feeling all of 8 years old, "I'm not ashamed and you know it. But if the world knew who I was, well, who knows what kind of danger you'd be in. I've made some powerful enemies, Mama." "Enemy schmememies," she said, waving her hands. "Don't worry yourself on my account. Don't make me the reason you end up in the cold. I'm not helpless, you know. I have mace." Hershey thought of the battles he'd fought, the soldiers, the mercenaries, the terrorists, the crooks and the super crooks, with their insane plots and impractical apparati. His mother was as formidable as an elderly Jewish woman with no grandchildren could be, but she was no match for automatic weapons. "I can't do it, Mama. It wouldn't be responsible. Can we drop it?" "Fine, we won't talk about it any more. But a mother worries. You're sure you don't need any money?" He cast about desperately for a way to placate her. "I'm fine. I've got a speaking engagement lined up." There was a message waiting on his comm when he powered it back up. A message from a relentlessly cheerful woman with a chirpy Texas accent, who identified herself as the programming coordinator for Defense Fest 33. She hoped he would return her call that night. Hershey hovered in a dark cloud over the lake, the wind blowing his coat straight back, holding the comm in his hand. He squinted through the clouds and distance until he saw his apartment building, a row of windows lit up like teeth, his darkened window a gap in the smile. He didn't mind the cold. It was much colder in his fortress of solitude, but his apartment was more than warmth. It was his own shabby, homey corner of the hideously expensive city. On the flight from his mother's, he'd found an old-style $50 bill, folded neatly and stuck in the breast pocket of his overcoat. He returned the phone call. The super wasn't happy about being roused from his sitcoms, but he grudgingly allowed Hershey to squirt the rent money at his comm. He wanted to come and take the padlock, but Hershey talked him into turning over the key, promising to return it in the morning. His apartment was a little one-bedroom with a constant symphony of groaning radiators. Every stick of furniture in it had been rescued from curbsides while Hershey flew his night patrols, saving chairs, sofas, and even a scarred walnut armoire from the trash man. Hershey sat at the round formica table and calmed Thomas. "It's me," he said. "What's up?" He didn't beat around the bush. "I'm speaking at Defense Fest. Then I'm going on tour, 6 months, speaking at military shows. It pays well. Very well. Very, very well. Well enough that he wouldn't have to worry about his pension. The U.S.-based promoters had sorted his tax status out with the IRS, who would cheerfully exempt him, totally freeing him from entanglements with Revenue Canada. The cheerful Texan had been glad to do it. He waited for Thomas's trademark stream of vitriol. It didn't come. Very quietly, Thomas said, "I see." "Thomas," he said, a note of pleading in his voice, "it's not my choice. If I don't do this, I'll have to give Wooly my secret identity. He won't give me my pension without my social insurance number." "Or you could get a job," Thomas said, the familiar invective snarl creeping back. "I told you I can't give out my social insurance number. So have your secret identity get a job. Wash dishes." "If I took a job," Hershey said, palm sweating, "I'd have to give up flying patrols. I'd have to stop fighting crime." "Fighting crime?" Thomas's voice was remorseless. "What crime? The Bugouts are taking care of crime. They're making places to shut down the police. They're making plans to shut down the police. Soup, you've been obsoleted." "I know," Hershey said, self-pitying. "I know. That's why I got involved with you in the first place. I need to have a purpose. I'm the Superman." "So your purpose is speaking to military shows? Telling the world that it still needs its arsenals, even if the Bugouts have made war obsolete? Great purpose, Soup. Very noble." He choked on a helpless sob. "So what can I do, Thomas? I don't want to sell out, but I've got to eat." "Squeeze coal into diamonds," he said. It was teasing, but not nasty teasing. Hershey felt his tension slip. Thomas didn't hate him. "Do you have any idea how big a piece of coal you have to start with to get even a 1-carat diamond? Trust me, someone would notice if entire coal faces started disappearing." "Look, Soup, this is surmountable. You don't have to sell out. You said it yourself. You're the Superman. You have responsibilities. You have duties. You can't just sell out. Let's sleep on it, huh?" Hershey was so very, very tired. It was always hardest on him when the Earth's yellow sun was hidden. The moon was a paltry substitute for its rejuvenating rays. "Let's do that," he said. "Thanks, Thomas." Defense Fest 33 opened its doors on one of those incredibly bright March days when the snow on the ground throws back lumens sufficient to shrink your pupils to microdots. Despite the day's brightness, a bitterly cold wind scoured Front Street and the Metro Convention Center. From a distance, Hershey watched the demonstration muster out in front of the Eaton Center, a few kilometers north, and march down to Front Street along the permit-prescribed route. The turnout was good, especially given the weather. About 5,000 showed up with woolly scarves and placards that the wind kept threatening to tear loose from their grasp. The veterans marched out front under a banner in full uniform. Next came the Quakers, who were of the same vintage as the veterans, but dressed like elderly English professors. Next came 3 different communist factions, who circulated back and forth, trying to sell each other magazines. Finally, there came the rabble. Thomas's groups of harlequin-dressed anarchists, high school students with pack-sacks who industriously calmed their browbeaten classmates who'd elected to stay at their desks, civilians who'd seen a notice and come out and tried gamely to keep up with the chanting. The chanting got louder as they neared the security cordon around the convention center. The different groups all mingled as they massed on the opposite side of the barricades. The Quakers and the vets sang "Give Peace a Chance," while Thomas and his cohort prowled around, distributing materiel to various trusted individuals. The students hollered abuse at the attendees who were trickling into the convention center in expensive overcoats, florid with expense account breakfasts, and immaculately groomed. Hershey's appearance silenced the crowd. He screamed in over the lake, banked vertically up the side of the CN Tower, and plummeted downward. The demonstrator set up a loud cheer as he skimmed the crowd, then fell silent and aghast as he touched down on the opposite side of the barricade with the convention-goers. A cop in riot gear held the door for him, and he stepped inside. A groan went up from the protesters and swelled into a wordless, furious howl. Hershey avoided the show's floor and headed for the green room. En route, he was stopped by a Somali general who'd been acquitted by a war crimes tribunal, but only barely. The man greeted him like an old comrade and got his aide to snap a photo of the two of them shaking hands. The green room was crowded with coffee-slurping presenters who pecked furiously at their comms, revising their slides. Hershey drew curious stares when he entered, but by the time he'd gotten his Danish and coffee, everyone around him was once again bent over their work, a field of balding cabbages anointed with high-tech hair care products. Hershey's palms were slick, his alien hearts throbbing in counterpoint. His cowlick wilted in the aggressive heat shimmering out of the vent behind his sofa. He tried to keep himself calm, but by the time a gopher calmed him and squirted directions to the main ballroom, he was a wreck. Hershey calmed into the feed from the demonstration in time to see the Quakers sit, en masse, along the barricade, hands intertwined, asses soaking in the slush at the curbside. The cops watched them impassively, and while they were distracted, Thomas gave a signal to his crew, who hastily unreeled a stories-high smart screen, the gossamer fabric snapping taut in the wind as it unfurled over the convention center's facade. The cops were suddenly alert, moving, but Thomas was careful to keep the screen on his side of the barricade. Tina led a team of high school students who spread out a solar collector the size and consistency of a parachute. It glinted in the harsh sun. Sandor hastily cabled a projector loudhailer apparatus to the collector. Sandor's dog nipped at his heels as he steadied and focused the apparatus on the screen, and Sandor plugged his comm into it and powered it up. There was a staticky pop as the speakers came to life, loud enough to be heard over the street noise. The powerful projector beamed its image onto the screen, bright even in the midday glare. There were hoots from the crowd as they recognized the feed, a live broadcast of the keynote address in the center, the patron Ixper Pat's hover chair prominent. The camera lingered on the patron's eyes, the only part of him visible from within the chair's masking infrastructure. They were startling silvery orbs, heavy-lidded and expressionless. The camera swung to Hershey. Sandor spat dramatically and led a chorus of hisses. Hershey hastily closed his comm and cleared his throat, adjusted his mic, and addressed the crowd. He said, his guts somersaulted. Time to go big or go home. Hi. That was better. Thanks. I'm the Superman. For years, I worked alongside UN peacekeeping forces around the world. I'd hoped I was doing good work. Most of the time, I suppose I may have been. He caught the eye of Brenda, the cheerful Texan who'd booked him in. She looked uneasy. There's one thing I'm certain of, though. It's that the preparation of war has never led to anything but war. With this show, you ladies and gentlemen are participating in a giant conspiracy to commit murder. Individually, you may not be evil, but collectively you're the most amoral supervillain I've ever faced. Brenda was talking frantically into her comm. His mic died. He simply expanded his mighty diaphragm and kept on speaking, his voice filling the ballroom. I urge you to put this behind you. We've entered into a new era in human history. The good patron here offers the entire universe. You scurry around, arranging the deaths of people you've never met. It's a terribly stupid, mindless pursuit. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. With that, Hershey stepped away from the podium and walked out of the ballroom. The camera tracked him as he made his way back through the convention center, out the doors. He leapt the barricade and settled in front of the screen. The demonstrators gave him a standing ovation, and Thomas gravely shook his hand. The handshake was repeated on the giant screen behind them, courtesy of the cameraman, who had gamely vaulted the barricade as well. The crowd danced, hugged each other, laughed. Sandor's dog bit him on the ass, and he nearly dropped the projector. He recovered in time to nearly drop it again as the patron Ixper Pat's hover chair glided out of the convention center's doors and made a beeline for Hershey. Hershey watched the car approach with nauseous dread. The patron stopped a few centimeters from him, so they were almost eyeball to eyeball. The hover chair's PA popped to life, and the patron spoke, in the Bugout's thrilling contralto. "Thank you for your contribution," the Bugout said. "It was refreshing to have another perspective presented." Hershey tried for a heroic nod. "I'm glad you weren't offended." "On the contrary, it was stimulating." "I shall have to speak with the conference's organizers. This format seems a good one for future engagements." Hershey felt his expression slipping, sliding towards slack-jawed incredulity. He struggled to hold it, then lost it entirely, when one of the patron's silvery eyes drooped closed in an unmistakable wink. "Hi, Mama." "Hershey, I just saw it on television." He cringed back from his calm as he shrank deeper into the corner of the Belkis that he'd moved to when his calm rang. Mama, it's all right. They've signed me on for the full 6 months. I'll be fine." "Of course you'll be fine, Bubby. But would it kill you to brush your hair before you go on television in front of the whole world? Do you want everyone to think your mother raised a slob?" Hershey smiled. "I will, Mama. I know you will, Bubby. You're a very good-looking man, you know. But nobody wants to marry a man with messy hair." "I know, Mama." "Well, I won't keep you. Do you think you could come to dinner on Friday? I know you're busy, but your old mother won't be here forever." He sighed his father's sigh. "I'll be there, Mama."